Okay, today's November 8th, and it's what is it? Wednesday. It's Wednesday, 1 p.m. So this is our Latin studies meeting. We're going to continue working in Latin reading, continue where we left off last time, 2 weeks ago. We're going to talk about vocabulary a little bit, and then we're going to spend some time today testing ourselves by looking at some Latin outside of the Gospel of John, because if let's stop with chat for a few minutes. Follow me here. The test of your Latin reading, anyone can say that they're studying Latin. Anyone can say that. There's thousands of kids who say, "Oh, I study Latin," and then if you show them Latin, some Latin to read, they can't read it, and it's we don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that we're testing ourselves, and if we're studying Latin the right way, we should see Latin and be able to read it. So today we're going to take a look at a couple other sources of Latin and see how we do. So we'll take some writing from St. Paul, the Apostle, and we'll also take a look at some writing from Julius Caesar, and we'll see how you guys are doing. Now, obviously, if you're getting started, you're not going to be able to read it, and I'm not going to ask you to. I'm not going to make fun of you for very long, but we want to test ourselves because it's the same vocabulary. What you're learning in the Gospel of John, if you learn it rightly, you're going to see the same vocabulary in other works, in the writings of St. Paul, in Julius Caesar, and so on. So I want to make sure that you guys can see that your Latin is improving. If you haven't studied much, you're not going to know it because you don't know the vocabulary. But for those of you who have gone through a bunch of lessons in Latin reading, you should begin to see, if you're not cheating, you should begin to see that you can read other things, and that's going to be the goal. So we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. Before we get started with, before I start getting started, I should say, any questions or anything, any troubles that anyone has had that you'd like to talk about, troubles that you think might affect the whole group, not just your own, private sorrows in life, but any general troubles with studies or Latin studies that you'd like to ask about before we get started, you can write no if there are none, and we'll get moving here. Any issues? I know grading is slow. Grading is going to be slow for a couple more days because I'm finishing a paper of my own. I haven't got it done yet, but I'll be done probably tonight. But I'll get grading caught up. So that's that. Okay. All right, so everything looks good. We'll talk about Latin grammar later. Okay, so let me share my page here. Let me share my screen. Give me a second. Let's take a look at Latin vocab lesson 5, which you should be able to see on your screen here. Now, I'm not intending to go over this to teach you this lesson because you have to study it on your own. That's your job. You've got to study it. But what I'd like to do is just walk through it so you can hear the words, get a sense of what's in the lesson. And if anything is interesting, or you're have questions about anything, feel free to ask questions. But I'd like to at least walk through it with you. Let me make sure I'm also letting students in here, the latecomers. Just a minute. All right, so let's walk through lesson 5 in Latin vocabulary, which covers fire. And you can see the Latin word for fire is ignis. Can anyone think of an English word derived from ignis? Can anyone think of an English word derived from ignis? Yeah, you all guessed ignite, ignition. Good. All right, so pretty simple. The ignition of a car, right? You sit in the car, turn the key, and what happens? You turn the key and the battery causes the spark plugs to spark and the starters to turn and the fuel to start pumping, and it ignites or starts the fire of the engine. Okay, so that's ignis, ignition. So that's the word for fire. Okay, very good. So in our lesson here, we've got this picture, one of these, and we talked about this yesterday in Aesop. What kind of picture is this? Does anybody remember? Anyone who was here for Aesop's yesterday? What kind of picture is this? What do we call this kind of artwork? Crosshatch just has to do with the lines, Joseph. That's just a style of shading by drawing lines. It's called engraving. Very good. Okay, engraving. So we see another example of engraving here. You can see all the lines. This crisscrossing of lines to make things lighter or darker is called crosshatching, as we said. But you can see that's the style of drawing or illustration that was used for bookmaking back in the old days. And this book was famous because it was the first picture book ever made that was intended for children. First picture book ever made. So kids thought this was really cool. Now you might look at this because you're all spoiled with multimedia and craziness. You have like pop-out books and all kinds of stuff. But for the kids at that time, this was high-tech stuff to have a picture book that you can read and look at pictures with and stuff like that. But anyway, if we look at this picture, you can see lots of items in the picture. You can see a fireplace on the right. You can see some stuff on the table here. And then outside the window, you can see that the city's on fire. So it looks like a scene of a bad day in the life of the student here when the city caught on fire. But remember that the images are intended to show you the vocabulary. And if you look carefully, you can see numbers. Here's a 2, here's a 3, here's a 4, there's a 5 down here in the corner. So you can see numbers in the picture. There's a 7 over here in the fireplace, and those numbers correspond to the numbers that you see in the lesson. Okay, so you can try to find those things in the picture if you can make them out okay. So that's how this book was intended to work. It was one of the first, or the first, like I said, the first picture book ever intended for students in a day when students really didn't have their own books. They didn't have books. They didn't carry around books and things like that. Usually the teacher would have the book. The teacher would read a passage to the students. The students would actually copy it down. So they practiced handwriting, and it's called dictation. They practiced writing down what the teacher read, and then they would study it, talk about it, memorize, and move on to the next information. But this was one of the first books intended for children. Okay, so let me just let some more students in here. All right, so the topic is fire, ignis. And we read, the fire glows, ignis ardet. So ardet means to glow. Now, where have you heard that in English? Have you ever heard a word in English derived from ardet? Ardet? Anybody? Maybe an older student might know this. Ever hear a word in English? No, not argon. Not argon. You just injected like 3 letters there that aren't in the word. Ardet. Arduous, that's a good guess. That's not from this though. Ardent is good. Jude got it. The word ardent. Okay, ardent describes, let's say, someone's love, right? Ardent love or ardent devotion. Ardent means glowing. It means it's warm. Ardent love means warm affections, okay? So fire glows, ignis ardet, urit. Urit is the word for burns, and consumeth to ashes, cremat. Anyone know an English word derived from cremat? How about cremat? Pretty easy, right? Cremation, yeah. Cremation is described there right in the lesson, consumes to ashes. So when someone dies, if they choose to be cremated, their body is burned and consumed to ashes. That's cremat. Okay, so the fire glows, it burns, and consumes. So 3 different verbs that speak of the action of fire. Fire glows, it burns, and consumes. Next, the spark. The word spark in Latin is scintilla. Scintilla. Anyone ever hear a word in English derived from scintilla? Scintilla. That's a more difficult one. Scintillate. Yeah, James, that's right. Scintillating. Right? The word scintillating. Usually it's used to say that something is exciting, like it was scintillating. It means it creates a spark. And the idea of a spark is that a spark begins a fire. So scintillating means it's arousing or stimulating. Okay. Scintilla, a spark. A spark of the fire, struck out of a flint. Now, let me just say, there's a bunch of vocabulary here that has to do with making fires. And you might wonder, why in the world would we want to waste all this time learning all this vocabulary about making a fire, right? Sparks and flints and tinder boxes? Like, who cares about this stuff? Well, remember, this book was made in like the 1600s. So there was no electricity. And you can imagine if kids lived at that time, making fire was a central part of their everyday life. They were probably helping to make fires all throughout the day. All cooking was done on fire, all heating was done with fire, lighting was done with fire. So learning these names like a spark, a flint, a steel, a tinderbox, a match, a candle. For you guys, that's sort of weird vocabulary, but for them, that was like basic stuff that was really helpful to know. Okay. I don't know if you guys have fireplaces or spend much time making fires, but for most people, that vocabulary is not going to be very helpful. But if you do know these things, it's helpful just to see the words. Okay. So scintilla is a spark that is struck out of a flint or silice. Silice, a flint. If you know what a flint is, it's a piece of stone, and if you strike it with metal, it causes a spark to come off. And if you prepare something like a pile of paper or some wood shavings or something like that, all you need is a couple of sparks to get them burning. So they would start it with a spark by means of a steel. That means that they would hit something made of steel on the piece of flint to make the spark, and carried by a tinder in a tinder box. A tinder would be a piece of wood usually that's easy to catch on fire. It's used to light a match. Sulfuratum. Sulfuratum. Why do you think a match is called sulfuratum in Latin? Why do you think a match is called sulfuratum? Yeah, obviously I know the word sulfur. Sulfur is on the end of it. Good, George. Okay. So it's basically a match is really just a piece of wood dipped in sulfur, and the sulfur is used because it catches on fire easily. So it was called sulfuratum. That was the word for a match in Latin. And from that, candelam, which is where we obviously get the word candle. Okay, so there's just some simple vocabulary that would have been very helpful for students who were involved in, making fires all day, every day. Okay, we don't do that, obviously. Next up, let me just center this here. Hold on a second. Or a stick, lignum. Lignum is the word for stick. It causes a flame. You see the word flammam. Flammam, okay? Flammam, it's where we get the word flammable. What does flammable mean? If I say that something is flammable, what does flammable mean? Able to catch flames, very good. Easily able to catch fire, all right? Yeah, it means easily able to catch fire. Everything's flammable, just about everything, at some temperature, right? But it means easily catches fire. So flammam is the word for flame. Blaze is incendium. Incendium is blaze, so that would be like a giant fire, incendium, which catches hold of houses, quod corripit edificia. Let's chill with the chat, all right? Chill with the chat. Edificia, remember a lot of this is not required vocabulary, so I want to just get through it. Edificia is houses or buildings. Anyone speak Spanish? What's the Spanish word for house? I think I see some Spanish names in the chat. Anyone know that? Not house, I'm sorry, building. What's the Spanish word for building? Starts with an E. Edificio, very good, okay? You can see that word edificio is derived from this Latin word edificia, right? You have the diphthong AE, which is changed to E, edificia. So a building is an edifice in English, edificio in Spanish, edificium in Latin, all right? So we've got lignum, stick, flammam, flame, incendium, blaze. Then we've got smoke, fumus. Fumus. What does it mean? What does it mean to fumigate? What does it mean to fumigate? I don't know if any of you have ever done this, to smoke something out. Yeah. So for example, if you've got bugs in your house, like let's say you've got a cat and the cat's full of fleas and there's fleas on the carpet and gets into the furniture and stuff like couches. It may get bad and you need to fumigate the house, where you cover everything up. You let off these smoke bombs of bug spray in the house and you smoke out the fleas, fumigate, okay? Smoke is spelled S-M-O-A-K just because that's an older way of spelling it. Okay, so the word for smoke is fumus. Fumigate is to smoke something out. So English words derived from fumus. Smoke ascends therefrom. Smoke ascends from fire, which adherens, that means sticking, adhering in English, adherens. Camino is the chimney. Camino, the chimney. Abit in fuliginem, turns into fuliginem, which is soot, the black stuff that sticks inside the chimney. And again, for most of you, if you're not working with fireplaces or cooking with fire, hardly anyone does today. These words don't seem that important, but again, you can imagine for kids studying in the 16th century, 1600s, these were words that they used and thought and talked about every day. So it was very common. Extore, a firebrand. We talked about a firebrand yesterday in Aesop's Fables. Extore, from a firebrand or burning stick, ligno ardente, is made a brand, titio, or a quenched stick, lignum extinctum. So the word extinct means quenched, like something that's been put out of life. A hot coal is pruna, a red hot piece of a firebrand, candente particulatoris, is made of coal. Carbo, where have you seen the word carbo before? Carbo, no, not cardboard. You stuck a D in there. You spelled cardboard wrong. Carbon, right? The element carbon. Okay, the element carbon. When we burn something, when we burn a piece of wood and all that's left is the black stuff, that's carbon. The Latin word is carbo. That's where that comes from. Another word for it is coal. Okay, in English. Our dead cinder just means a dead bit of coal. I guess I could just say coal again. Particula mortua. That which remains behind after the fire is at last ashes. The word for ashes is chinis, and embers, favila. Favila, which means glowing ashes. Okay. So that's all the vocab here for lesson 5. Again, I don't intend to teach this in these meetings. We don't have time for that. You need to study it on your own. But just to walk through it, make sure you hear the words pronounced. Think about how the words are used for English derivatives. That's what I'd like to cover in these classes. Any questions about any of this vocabulary here while we're on this? Because we're going to move on to Latin reading. Any questions about anything you saw in here? Anything pop in your head that you think might be interesting? No, nothing in your head that's interesting? Okay, we'll move on here. We'll move on to Latin reading. Okay, so that's lesson 5 in vocabulary. The topic is fire, ignis, okay? Now, for Latin reading. Last class time we met, can we do lessons on Thursday? I don't know what that means. We have Greek on Thursday, yeah. Last week in Latin reading, we translated verses 6 through 8 here. Okay, so 6 through 8. So what we're going to do is review that real quick. I'll give you a chance to prove that you were paying attention, if you were paying attention, and then we'll look at verses 9 and 10. All right, so let's look at verse 6. Fuit homo missus ad Deo. What does fuit homo mean? Go ahead and type it in the chat. If you know it, type it. If you don't type it, we'll all assume you don't know it. There was fuit homo. There was, nope, some guessers in there. I see some guessers. Fuit homo. I can tell the students who do their translation exercises carefully and those who don't very easily. There was, many of you wrote there was, and you're all wrong. It doesn't, fuit homo does not mean there was. In English, well, Ava, if you want to, or Ava, I still don't know how to say your first name. You can add that course if your parents want you to. In the Latin here, what word or what words are translated there was? What's translated there was? Who knows what word or words is translated there was? Yeah, fuit. So there was is just fuit. Okay, that first word, fuit, that means there was. So when I ask you to translate fuit homo, you have to go beyond there was. Okay. Fuit homo means there was a man. Okay, there was a man. Homo means man. We talked about that last week. Fuit homo, there was a man. Missus adeo. What does missus adeo mean? Missus adeo. Sent from God. Very good. Missus means sent. A means from. Deo means God. So, fuit homo missus adeo. There was a man sent from God. Cui nomen erat Ioannes. What does that mean? Cui nomen erat Ioannes. No looking up, no Google, no checking your papers. Cui nomen erat Ioannes. For whom the name was John. Yeah, it is fast. That's good. That's good. It's good to be fast. We find out who knows it right off the top of their head. That's how we know who really knows it. Cui nomen erat Johannes, for whom the name was John. Just wait until I start publishing all the exams with timers on them. You'll see how fast they are. Okay. Cui nomen erat Johannes, for whom the name was John. Good. Verse 7, hic venit in testimonium. What does that mean? Hic venit in testimonium. Yes, Athanasius, Johannes means John in Latin. That's right. Hic venit in testimonium. Hic venit. Now everyone can see who does the translation exercises carefully and who doesn't. Hic venit in testimonium. This came for a testimony. This man came for a testimony. That's the right translation. Everyone else who has anything else is wrong. Okay. Ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. Ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine, sorry. Translate that. Translate that. Ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. Anna, stay on topic here. Come on. Ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. So that a testimony he might give concerning the light. Very good. Macrina, that was close, but no cigar. So that a testimony he might give concerning the light. Adel, that's very good. So the testimony he might give concerning light. Sarah, that's very good. So that a testimony he might give concerning the light. Jude, that looks good. So the testimony might be given. No, that's not good. Might be given is not right. See, in Latin, that phrase might be given would require a different verb form. So that's not right. So that a testimony he might give concerning the light. Very good, Cecilia. Okay, let's move on here. Ut omnes crederent per illum. Ut omnes crederent per illum. Translate that for me. Ut omnes crederent per illum. Ut omnes crederent per illum. So that all might believe through him. That's good, Hazel Barths. So that all might believe through him. That's good, Cecilia. Good, James. Good, Lara. Sarah did well, but asked the question. So that all might believe through him. Yes, that's right. So that all men might believe through him. That's good, George. Okay, good. They all look good. Those of you who are writing now are just copying, so I'm not going to pay attention to yours. Verse 8. Non erat ille lux. Non erat ille lux. Give me that translation. Non erat ille lux. Not was he the light. Not was he the light. Not was he the light. Okay. Not was he light. Not was he the light. Yeah, good. All right, good. Non erat ille lux. Good. Not was he the light. But, and we're not going to translate this, so don't start typing. I know some of you start typing and then you enter it real fast to look impressive, but we're not going to translate this next part. Non erat ille lux. He was not the light, sedut testimonium perhiberet de lumine, but so that a testimony he might give concerning the light. All right, so that's verses 6, 7, and 8. Now, if you're very slow or you have no idea what we're even talking about, it's just because, these other students have already been working on this course for a long time. And we reviewed that from last week. So they're not really that smart. So don't think they're that smart. We translated that last class. Okay. You can go back and watch our old class videos and get all of that translation, but students either were, in class last week and worked about it, or they've already studied these lessons and worked through them and they know them in detail. So don't think that if you can't translate it, it's like God didn't give you the gift of Latin translation. It's because they've been studying. All right. Just takes some time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean last week. I meant the week before last week. Okay. All right. So don't worry. You should be working on the online course, studying one verse at a time, taking your time, doing the translation exercises, mastering the lessons. And when you do that, you'll be able to translate that quickly. Also, there are many students, I shouldn't say many, I should be generous. There are some students who we know submit the translation exercises and they're not really studying them. They're not doing them multiple times. They're not mastering the translation. They're just writing it once and submitting it. And you're just never going to learn like that. So once I get the exams published, we're going to catch those scoundrels. But what you should be doing is following the instructions and make sure you repeat the translation exercises multiple times until you can complete them without looking at the lesson. All right. So let's look at verse 9. Move on to some new stuff. Verse 9, erat lux vera. Erat lux vera. What does erat mean? Erat. Yes, scoundrels. That's right. Erat means was. Good. Very good. Okay, very good. And just so you know, if you type it wrong, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you don't think was is spelled AWS. All right, so good. Was. Lux. What does lux mean? Erat lux. What does lux mean? Light. Very good. And vera. What does vera mean? Vera. True. Good. Not treu. True. All right. Erat lux vera. He was, or it was, the true light. Okay. The light true. It was the light true. Notice the word order in Latin. The substantive noun comes first, then the adjective. Spanish is also like that. English does it the other way around. English people think Latin is weird, but really English is the language that's weird. Erat lux vera. It was the light true. Que. What does que mean? Which. Very good. What part of speech is que? What part of speech is que? Very good. It means which. That's right. And the part of speech is, come on, part of speech. This is where it gets really, really crazy when you guys guess parts of speech. I've seen pronoun. I've seen preposition. It's a pronoun. It's a word that stands in place of a noun. He was the true light which. Illuminat. That's an easy one, so I'm not going to ask you that. Illuminat. Omnem hominem. What does omnem hominem mean? Omnem hominem. Now, for omnem hominem, there's a good translation and there's a better translation. Omnem hominem. So far, I see the good translation, but not the better translation. Omnem hominem. Some of you wrote all men. That's okay, but it's not really what you should write. It should be every man, because omnem and hominem are singular. So it's really not saying all men, it's saying every man. All right, good. Okay, I see some of you got that right. So erat lux vera, it was the true light, the light true, which illuminates omnem hominem, every man, venientem. What does venientem mean? Venientem. Not coming into the world, you're jumping ahead. Just venientem. Venientem. All right, here we go. Buckle up. What part of speech is venientem? I'm predicting wild guesses. What part of speech is venientem? I don't want now listen, if you're trying to hurry up and answer and you have no idea what the answer is, that doesn't make much sense. If you think about it, if you think about it, especially if you study classical grammar, which I hope you do, if you study classical grammar, you should know. And you should use the process of elimination because some of the answers that you put in are just, crazy. It can't possibly be some of those wacky answers. So let's think about it. Venientem, venientem. What does it mean? What's the translation? Let's start with the translation. What does venientem mean? Spelling is interesting too. Not only are some of the answers wrong, but they're spelled with incredible creativity. Venientem. Venientem means coming. Good. Okay, so let me ask you this. Listen carefully. Does this word express tense or time? Does this word express time? If so, what time? If it does, what time? If you say no, you're wrong. If you say yes, you're right. What time? Present time. Present. Very good. Okay, so it expresses present time. Now, assuming that you, like me, are a rational creature, if it's present time, or if it expresses time, I should say, what are the only parts of speech that it could possibly be? There are not many. That express time. What could it possibly be? There are two kinds. What are the two kinds of parts of speech that could be expressing time? Good. I saw George got it right. So if you look at George's answer, he wrote participle or verb. So if you look at a word and there's time expressed by the word, it can only be a participle or a verb. They're the only parts of speech that express time. Okay, classical grammar will help you with that if you are wondering where you would learn that. So venientem is either a verb or a participle. How do we determine? Who can tell me how we determine whether it's a verb or a participle? Don't get excited, Victor, because you're wrong. That's a wrong answer. How can we tell if it's a verb or a participle? Macrina, that's a good guess. Yeah, the thing test is a good idea. The Pelletiers have it here. Okay, look, this is from classical grammar. Look at what Josh and Gio wrote. It's a participle because it expresses the idea of an adjective, and it's also expressing the idea of a verb. So it's sort of a combination of an adjective and verb. All right. A participle is a verbal adjective. All right. Yeah, some of this spelling is suspicious. It's a verbal adjective. All right, so venientem, coming, and then we have in mundum. What is in mundum? Translate in mundum. In mundum. Into the world. Good. All right, so verse 9, erat lux vera, it was the light true, quae illuminat, which illuminates, omnem hominem, every man, venientem in mundum, coming into the world. All right. Verse 10, in mundo erat. What does that mean? In mundo erat. In mundo erat. Make sure you translate each word. In mundo erat. In the world was. Right, that's good. In the world he was. Very good. Very good. Very good. Okay, we're at the point now where the copiers are posting answers. In the world he was. Okay, good. Et mundus. Et mundus. What does et mundus mean? Et mundus. And the world. Good. You can put the in there. And if you put the in, put it in parentheses. And the world. The in parentheses. In mundo erat. In the world he was. And the world per ipsum. What does per ipsum mean? Per ipsum. Per ipsum. Very good, very good, very good, very good. All those answers look good. Now we're getting into copier territory, so we'll stop there. Per ipsum, through him, and the world through him, factus est. Factus est. What does that mean? Factus est, made is. Made was, someone wrote. That's okay, actually. Made is. Very good. Okay, so in mundo erat, in the world he was, et mundus per ipsum factus est, and the world through him made is or made was, et mundus, and the world, eum. What does eum mean? Wow, you guys are doing pretty good here. Him doesn't mean made is. Don't know where that came from. Eum, him. What part of speech is eum? Here comes the craziness. Pronoun, some say. Pronoun. Well, that looks pretty good. Pronoun, very good. Eum is a pronoun. Okay. I know parts of speech are hard. So when I ask part of speech, I expect like a whole circus of answers to come in. Very good. Pronoun. And then we have non cognovit. Non cognovit. Non cognovit. Not no, not new, not new, not did no, not new, not did no. Yeah, they're all good answers. Very good. So non cognovit, not did no. All right. This word non, what part of speech is non? What part of speech? Think, please, please. Take 1 second and think before you answer. Look at these answers. Adjective, verb, adverb. Oh my. Article, someone wrote. Article, adverb, adjective, verb. Somebody wrote dinosaur, conjunction. All right, we're guessing here. One of these is right. The word known, what does the word known do? Think about it. What does the word do? What does known do in this phrase or sentence? Command? Oh, that would make sense if like your mother is always yelling at you, known, right? It's a command, like don't do it. But that's not what we have here. Okay. Non-cognovit, what does it? It negates a verb. Sarah, very good. Sarah has it. Sarah has a very good answer here. It negates a verb, okay? It modifies a verb. What part of speech modifies a verb? Adverb, very good. Adverb, adverb, adverb. Okay, good. All right, so now let me just, dinosaur, very good. All right, so when you're asked to identify a part of speech, which is important, okay, it's important to know the parts of speech. When you're asked to identify the parts of speech, there's two things you should think about. You should think about what does the word mean? That's the first thing. What does the word mean? And secondly, what is the word doing in this sentence or in this phrase? Those two things, the meaning of the word and the function of the word. That helps you to identify the part of speech. Yeah, mod verb. Yeah, you guys are just going to start coining your own terms here. So the adverb modifies a verb, okay? So known is an adverb. And then cognovit, what part of speech is cognovit? If I dare ask, what part of speech is cognovit? Wow. Wow. Very good. Consensus. Everyone's got it except one person. All right, good. I was the one who started the dinosaur thing, so I'm guilty of that. I was just joking because the answers coming in started to seem crazy, and I was expecting things like dinosaur, microscope. I didn't know what was coming next. All right, so good. So cognovit is a verb. So verse 10, if we look back at verse 10, in mundo erat, in the world he was, and the world through him made is, and the world him not did know. Okay, very good. Yeah, I asked for that one. All right, now what I said before I wanted to do, and again, I don't expect you to learn this when we go through it together. It's meant just to kind of review and allow you to hear the words, think about things. The back and forth of live classes is helpful and good for you. That's what I like these classes to be. I don't intend you to learn all of this in these classes, so don't worry. You study it on your own, and then we talk about it in these live classes. What I said before I'd like to do is look at some other Latin. So let's look at some other Latin. and see how you guys do. Those of you who think you're so smart because you can answer all the questions so fast and you get to show off in front of everybody. Well, let's put your Latin expertise to the test here, okay? So this here is Epistola Beati Pauli Apostoli ad Romanos. Who can translate that? Epistola Beati Pauli Apostoli ad Romanos. Who can take a guess? Now, James is already down here translating this because he's trying to cheat and jump ahead and look smart. But I asked you to translate the title here. Epistola Beati Pauli Apostoli ad Romanos. All right, let's see. Epistle of Paul the Apostle to the Romans. Epistle of Blessed Paul. Beati means blessed or saint. Epistle of Paul the Apostle to the Romans. Epistle of the Blessed Paul the Apostle to the Romans. Very good. Now, Josephine, you're kind of adding things in there. Try to stick to the words exactly. We don't want to get into this, oh, I'm just translating the ideas. No. Translate the words. We don't translate ideas, we translate words. Letter of St. Paul to the apostle. No, that's not right. Not to the apostle. Epistle of Paul the apostle to the Romans. That's right. Okay. Epistola, epistle. This B period, this abbreviation is short for Beati. It's like how we abbreviate the word saint, ST period. Beati, Pauli, Apostoli. So epistle of Blessed Paul the Apostle. Ad means to, and Romanos, to the Romans. All right. And then we have verse 1 here. And again, none of you have studied this, so it should be new. So let's take a look. Paulus, obviously a name, right? Paul, so that's easy. So don't get confident yet. It's just a name. Paulus means Paul. How about Servus Jesu Christi? What does Servus Jesu Christi mean? No, not served. Servus Jesu Christi. Servus Jesu Christi. Yeah, so we've got some say servant, some say slave. That's good. Yeah, you did very well there. Who was that? Bernadette, you were all over, Jesu Christi, you got that right. Servus Jesu Christi, the whole phrase though, a servant of Jesus Christ. That's what it means. So servus, Paulus, a servant of Jesus Christ, Jesu Christi. So if Jesu Christi is translated of Jesus Christ, what case is it in? What case? If it's translated of Jesus Christ, what case is it in? Genitive. Very good. Okay, very good. Genitive. Now, if you don't know the answer to the questions I ask, you should be wondering, why don't I know the answer? It's probably because you haven't studied grammar enough. Okay. So one of the benefits of our live classes is to help you see what you need to give more attention to. All right. Paulus, servus Jesu Christi, a servant of Jesus Christ. Vocatus. What does vocatus mean? Now hold on a second before the craziness ensues. We're rational creatures, so we need to think first, okay? We need to think first. Vocatus. Now you can think in Gospel of John, if you've studied Gospel of John, where you've seen this kind of an ending before, atus, right? Vocatus. Obviously, some of you are jumping on the voice part, right? You're jumping on voice, vocation. You're just sort of throwing out anything you can think of with VOC in it. But look at the Latin word, vocatus, vocatus, vocatus. All right, look at what George wrote there, called, all right? Vocatus means called, all right? Not calling, called, vocatus, called. And what is he called? He is called apostolos. All right. So Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, vocatus apostolos, called an apostle. Let's work on some spelling there. Apostol, that's not right. Apostil is not right. You guys need to all work on spelling, man. Paulus, servus Jesu Christi, a servant of Jesus Christ, called an apostle. Now look at segregatus. Notice it's got an ending like vocatus. Segregatus. What do you think segregatus means? Segregatus. Joseph got it right off the bat. Very good, Sarah. That's right. Separated, segregated, they mean the same thing. Segregated or separated. In English, we would, more commonly translate this as separated. So Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called apostle, segregatus, separated in evangelium. In evangelium. Now, I know that some of you are going to write in, but that's because you're not thinking. Think about the Gospel of John. We have the preposition in, and then we have a noun ending in . Remember, the Gospel of John begins in principio, and it's translated in the beginning. This is not like that. This is in evangelium. Whoa. In evangelium. Macrina is very close for evangelization, she said. Cecilia, for evangelization. This word evangelium means the gospel, okay? Evangelium means the gospel. So he was segregatus in evangelium. What does that whole phrase mean? Segregatus in evangelium. Segregatus in evangelium. What does that mean? I'm guessing that brains are starting to melt at this point. Segregatus in evangelium. Separated, not from evangelization. I would hope that he was not separated from the gospel. Separated for the gospel. Okay, very good. All right, very good. Now you'll notice that the rational creatures among us do much better because we tend to think before we answer, right? We think about it. We say, no, it can't be possible that St. Paul was separated from the gospel. That can't be the translation. So we scratch that one off. We don't write that. We scratch that one off the list. Okay. Segregatus in evangelium. Separated for the gospel Dei. What is Dei? What's the difference between epistola and apostoli? Well, they sound a little bit alike, but just look at the words. They're not the same words. Epistola and apostoli. Two different words. Dei means of God. Very good. So verse 1, Paulus, servus Jesu Christi. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, vocatus apostolus, called apostle, segregatus in evangelium Dei, separated for the gospel of God. Now here's one you should know. Quod. Quod. What does quod mean? What does quod mean? What does quod mean? Come on. Where are all the smart people at that have all the fast answers? That or which. Good. Okay, it's a pronoun. Which. How about ante? Ante is a preposition. Think. Ante, very good. Sarah, very good. Hazel Barths. It means before. Okay, so which before promisserat. Now, think. It's just reasonable. You can obviously tell here what the verb is, right? It doesn't take a wizard to know what this verb is. But think about the context. Don't make a guess at a translation that really doesn't make any sense. Quod ante promisserat, which before promisserat. So give me a translation of quod ante promisserat that actually makes some sense. Sarah, that's a good guess. Cecilia, that's pretty good. Which before was promised. Okay. All right, so good. You're getting there. That's good. Which before he had promised. That's what it actually is. he had promised. Now, let me ask you this. How in the world would you know that? How would you know if it was he promised, he did promise, he had promised, he has promised? There's lots of different possible translations. How would you know exactly how to translate that word? Yeah, I'm not taking any questions. So you can raise your hand, but we're not doing that. You can ask a question in the chat if you have a question. By the ending of the verb, okay, that's a good guess. That's sort of like the default Latin grammar class answer. But we learn that by studying grammar, right? You learn that by studying the forms of verbs. So you have to study grammar. That's what you're missing there, okay? By living in Rome, that would definitely help, but that's probably not a sustainable way to learn Latin. Quod ante promisserat, which before he had promised, let's keep going here, per prophetas, through the prophets, very good. Through the prophets, I should say, per prophetas suos, per prophetas suos. How about that? Add suos in there. I know that you've seen suos if you've looked at the Gospel of John. Sui eum non receperunt, right? You've seen sui. Here you have suos, same pronoun, different form. Per prophetas suos. What does that mean? Through the prophets, his own, right? Through his prophets. Good. In scripturis sanctis. In scripturis sanctis. In scripturis sanctis. We're going to wrap up here. In scripturis sanctis. In the Holy Scripture. In sacred Scripture. In Scripture holy. Very good. Okay. Now, the reason why I wanted to go over this is just so that you could see, to some degree at least, that the language that you're learning in the Gospel of John, the vocabulary you're learning, is the vocabulary for the most part that you're going to run into in other readings. You're going to see there's new vocabulary. Segregatus would be a new vocabulary. Evangelium might be new vocabulary. Promisserat. Okay, so there's some new vocabulary, but a lot of the vocabulary is going to be the same. That's a good test of your development in Latin studies. So good. Let's do one more real quick. We'll look at Caesar. This is the writing of Julius Caesar. Gallia is the name of a place, Gaul. So don't worry about that. That's just vocabulary. Gallia est. What is est? No, it's not and. Est is. Omnis. Omnis. All. Very good. All, not all things. It's omnis, not omnia, just omnis. All. Divisa. Take an intelligent guess. Divisa. Very good, George. Very good, Sarah. Divided. Good. Okay. Gaul is, omnis means whole. Divided in partes tres. In partes tres. In three parts. Here's a good challenge. Quorum. 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 This is a challenge here. Quorum. Let's see who's really sharp. No, not aquarium. Quorum. No, not four. No, not four. No, not four. Yes, Sarah, that's right. Of which. It's genitive of which. Gaul is a whole divided into three parts, of which unam, one. Incolent is a word you don't know. It means to live in or to dwell. Belgae is the name of another place. So anyway, this is the Latin of Julius Caesar. Just more vocabulary. Just more vocabulary. But as we go along, we want to challenge ourselves to read other Latin. You'll see often you just need to study more vocabulary, but you should be able to see yourself getting better and better. If you're not getting better, I can tell you the reason why is because you're not studying grammar and you're not actually mastering the Latin readings. You're just lazily submitting translation exercises without actually studying them for mastery. And that's never going to work. All right. So we put some time together. I know Jude. Jude's our alarm clock. He's like our rooster here in the live meeting. All right. So we looked at a couple different sources of Latin. We looked at Latin reading verses 9 and 10. Remember, these live classes are intended just to challenge you, to give you the chance to exercise a little bit. If you're studying well, it gives you a chance to flex a little and show off, which is good for you. It's a reward for studying. But you need to study the lessons on your own for mastery. And then when we come together, put yourself to the test. That's what the classes are for. So that's all for today. That's all for today. I'll let you go before you wear out the exclamation mark keys on your keyboards. So that's all that we've got for today. We looked at a vocabulary lesson. We looked at a Latin reading lesson, checked out some other sources of Latin and tested ourselves a little bit. Now it's time to get to work on your own lessons. Make sure you're moving forward with assignments. Make sure you're studying carefully. And we'll keep moving on little by little, okay? So that's all for today. You're free to go. And if you have any questions, anything you'd like to talk about, anything we talked about in class that you'd like to get into a little deeper or understand, feel free to ask. All right. So that's all for today. Where can you find the Latin text from Caesar? Well, I have access to lots of resources, obviously. This book here that you see, this is called the Loeb Classical Library. This is not free. So those of you who are committed to navigating through the world at no cost, you're not going to be able to get a hold of this. But the Loeb Classical Library, it's really amazing. It has zillions of Greek and Latin works. You can see all the different authors, all these different authors, just tons and tons, hundreds and hundreds of books in Latin and Greek with English translation. It's a subscription service, unfortunately, but that's where I would get those texts from. But you can find them online. If you go to archive.org, you can find anything classical online. Okay. Yeah, physical copies. They're printed books. I don't think I have any on my desk right now. I don't have any on my desk to show you, but the Loeb Classics are printed. They're small green and red books, but they're expensive. They're like 20 bucks a piece. They're not cheap. They look nice. They're fun to study from, but they're pretty expensive. Okay. Yeah, Anna, we can talk about, you asked about diphthongs. What I'd like to know, Anna, is what you actually wanted to know about diphthongs. What does Rhenum mean? It means it's the name of the Rhine River. You know the Rhine River? Rhenum means Rhine. Yeah. I can probably find it for you real quick if I look. If I can find you a copy of Caesar. One thing that's great about classical studies is all the books are available online for free. So it's actually much cheaper to study classical studies than modern studies because you don't have to buy a billion books. Epistola is epistle, yeah. If there are any questions, feel free to post. I'm going to actually stop our recording here.